NHL insider Frank Seravalli of the Frankly Speaking podcast and the Daily Faceoff joins us. Trade deadline. Why so slow, bro?
I have no idea. There's been lots of talk, certainly on the Jacob Markstrom front, in the last 8 days, but these things kind of grind to a halt. And we were talking about the Canucks getting ahead of the market and doing some early shopping. Once Sean Monahan was off the board as well, the market got really thin in a hurry. And I think teams realize that it's not so much about what's left to pick at. It's, can we drum up some new fresh ground? And that's, I think, sort of where the holdup's been.
The Canucks have gone off and brought Phil Kessel to town. What's your sense here? Are we going to see him playing for the Canucks?
I haven't gotten a report on what his skating has been like in Abbotsford. I think there weren't any promises made. I think it was, hey, let's get a peek at you and see what you look like, essentially. And it's never, just FYI, that's not me making a Phil Kessel joke. It's not a fitness thing with him. His fitness numbers have actually always been great, but anytime any player takes this much time off of playing, it's certainly a concern. So for me, I do think you'll end up seeing him. I think it's a no risk signing if/when it happens. And I think the reasons from the Canucks perspective make a lot of sense. Aside from just the personal connections and trust that they have, I mean, the Canucks lineup in and of itself, they've been sort of moving puzzle pieces around to try and find fits. And I think they're going to sign him, but I really have questions about his ability to be an impact guy. But yeah. I don't think it's any harm in trying to find out.
Do you think if they sign him and he gets into the mix here in the however many games are left, do you think they're done at forward, or do you think they would still be looking to add a forward?
At forward, I would assume they would be, but I think that leaves the door wide open to focus whatever assets you have left on the defense market.
The fact that Phil Kessel's here is mostly due to the fact that Rick Tocchet is here and his affinity for Rick Tocchet.
Not just Rick Tocchet. I think Jim Rutherford.
Others as well, yes. Mm-hmm. But in terms of the on ice, Connor Garland has been glowing recently about Rick Tocchet and how he got him his contract and has brought the best out of him this season as well. And Elias Lindholm comes over from Calgary and has had 2 marvelous games and a few so-so ones, but his stats are exactly where Vancouver Canucks management, I'm sure, wanted them to be. Mm-hmm. He's scoring goals again as well. Could Rick Tocchet manifest this team to be good over the next couple of years because people might want to play for Rick Tocchet based on all this evidence?
Why not? I mean, players talk. Everyone knows what the situation is. You know pretty quickly who has a good reputation, who doesn't. And I think what everyone really appreciates about Rick Tocchet, aside from the fact that the Canucks are winning this year, is there's no fluff. Like you're never confused about where you stand. Like any conversation you have with him, it's like, he's transparent, translucent, for better or worse. You can always understand exactly where you are. And that, I think, is such a unique ability to have. And look, let me put it this way. Like, there are plenty of people who are transparent that are just absolute assholes too. Mm-hmm. So like it does work both ways, but he has such a genuine nature about him and good nature that I think even when he's delivering you something that you might not love, it's because he cares, and it's from, it's from a place of deep knowledge. It's not just someone spouting off. So it's a trust factor. And I think he's been around so long and played and been in so many different situations, and then was an assistant coach in so many different spots. There's a lot of people that are great assistant coaches that never make the transition to being good head coaches because they can't have that same relationship that assistants do. And I think he's found a way to break through that. And it's all due to his personality.
The reason I bring it up too is because there's so much attention on the third line here and the marvelous job they've done with 2 UFAs to be, of course, on that line. And those 2 UFAs, it's certainly within their right, and we fully expect them to try to get, one more good contract for both of them, in Teddy Blueger and Dakota Joshua. But maybe if those guys don't give a discount to play with Rick Tocchet, is it possible that, the Tocchet factor can help somebody else get the new Blueger, get another show me guy, show me 100%. Contract, to come in and replace those 2 guys?
Yeah, look, I think the NHL and the salary cap era is littered with examples of teams that overpay, and the Canucks' previous cap structure is littered with examples of teams that overpay for bottom 6 players. And this isn't a knock on Blueger or Dakota Joshua. It's just that this is a plug and play environment. Like, you should be able to, some of the things that they do and are really good at, you should either be able to coach that out. Like, there's no reason for a bad penalty kill. It's effort and execution. You can coach it. And if you're not getting the work ethic, we'll go find someone who does. And so you see these players that kind of bounce around and do some of these things really well. They're sought after. And so they get little incremental raises. They get 1 extra year a term, and they're nice pieces to have. But for a team that has such top end talent, the Canucks can't be in a spot where they're overpaying to keep them, no matter how well they've worked. Let another team, let a competitor go overpay them and go out and find the next guy who wants the opportunity to be given the rope that Rick Tocchet has afforded Teddy Blueger and Dakota Joshua. Remember, before the season started, about how kind of hard Rick Tocchet was on Dakota Joshua and how frank his comments were, just basically saying like, hey, I know this guy's got a lot here, but I haven't seen it yet. And it takes someone to drag that out of you. And I think that's really important.
Well, and of course, the genius of his system is, as you noted, it's simplified enough that you should be able to plug and play guys. So no, they got a good thing going on here with this head coach. On top of him being a sensational communicator, as we've covered, the X's and O's are sounds too. And I think that explains.
It's not rocket science. Like, this is a simple game. And Rick Tocchet will be the first person to tell you, like, and I'm sure there's been many people over the years that have underestimated his intelligence, but he'll be the first to tell you that he's not a rocket scientist, that this doesn't take a brainiac level of thinking to be a good communicator, to be able to instill something that works and be successful. And I think the simplification part of that, it's understandable in any language.
The Jake Guentzel injury, coupled with yet another Pittsburgh Penguins loss. I know we ask you a lot about that team across the Commonwealth.
Well, you should, because you're Pittsburgh West right now.
Exactly. They go fishing in the Western Pennsylvania rivers and ponds. So you tell
gross,
me,
by the way.
Yeah, spoken as a Philly guy.
Yeah.
You tell me where the Penguins are at with regards to still being in the hunt or not. You tell me how the Guentzel injury may have affected his suitors, if at all.
I do not believe it affects his trade value. I think, not knowing the specifics of the injury, I should say, we know him being placed on LTIR. We can sort of pinpoint a vague return. We know it's not going to be before the deadline now. And I would say that, given my past experience and reporting on it, that it's not a medical opinion. It's just that I know teams were trying to trade with the Anaheim Ducks last year for Adam Henrique, knowing that he was going to miss weeks beyond the deadline. And every year there's someone that pops up that gets traded that teams aren't thinking of the window from March 8th to March 27th. They're thinking of the playoffs, and that's it. And so if we can get, at that point, a healthy Jake Guentzel, which we don't have any indication to believe that wouldn't be the case, then I think the market is still going to be there for him, and the price is probably going to be more or less the exact same. The tough part for the Penguins is, in some ways, just from a pure paper perspective, you would think that what this injury does is more or less help seal that they'll be a non-playoff team, and that his last game as a Penguin probably would have already occurred. Now, we can't say that for certain because for whatever God unknown reason in this sport, seemingly more than any other, key players go down and teams play better. I watched the Pittsburgh Penguins win a Stanley Cup without Chris Letang. It defies logic, doesn't make sense, but sometimes these things happen. And so I can't officially rule out that the Penguins will be a playoff team, but it certainly feels like they're trending in that direction. And if that's the case, then I think they have no choice but to move on from Jake Guentzel.
Social media and those darn podcasters have been chatting a lot about the future of Sidney Crosby. And you've answered this question before, I believe. But
I answered it again this morning on radio. Like, why is this a thing?
Yeah, I guess people just don't understand why both sides would just want this relationship to continue when it will not end in another Stanley Cup. But I do hear that the concrete evidence is that Crosby's not going anywhere, is it?
I don't have any evidence to point to think that it's even been a topic of conversation internally, let alone in Sidney Crosby's own brain. I don't have the ability to glean that much, but it's never been talked about far as I can tell.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why it has been a thing, but
I think people don't understand it. I think people don't understand it.
Don't understand what?
That he wouldn't want to win a cup somewhere because it's not going to be there, and that they wouldn't want to reap the benefits of trading Sidney Crosby.
I think there's lots of evidence to the contrary. First off, I think the Pittsburgh Penguins franchise value as a whole is significantly degraded without Sidney Crosby there, even for a team that's rebuilding and on the brink of probably a decade of darkness. I think the idea that Mario Lemieux played all of his games as a Pittsburgh Penguin probably means something, and to be a one franchise player. And the other part of it is it's not like he's someone that hasn't won 3 Stanley Cups, 4 trips to the final, every piece of hardware you could imagine, Olympic gold medals, like the biggest goal in Canadian history. Like with all due respect to Paul Henderson, like what more could you possibly need to fulfill in your career that would make you want to go do that? I mean, that's just my view, but I'm also not, a Mount Rushmore class NHL player that has a competitive fire.
Hot take.
What?
Season ends. Crosby surveys the landscape, lets the dust settle, and says, you know what I have left to achieve in my career? Winning a Stanley Cup for Canada. And why don't I do it back in the same city where I won a gold medal for Canada? He requests a trade to the Vancouver Canucks because he believes in the management and coaching staff here.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I have a better chance getting pregnant. I would say if there were a Canadian team that Sidney Crosby were to pick, it would probably be the Montreal Canadiens.
That's what I was thinking.
That's his favorite childhood team, but they're not close enough to a Stanley Cup, Frank. So that's why it's going to be the Canucks.
Yet.
Yeah, but he's got 1 year left. Next year
together. Yeah. And why can't Sidney Crosby play until he's 40?
No, he could. I'm just saying.
He's only 36.
Next year is the last year of his contract, and the Canucks are closer to a Stanley Cup than the Habs.
So the other working theories has been, he'll go play with Nathan McKinnon in Colorado.
Right, I could see that as well.
Or he will go play with Connor McDavid in Edmonton, which again don't see. And then the one that was whispered about like 3 years ago was always, Sid loves California. He spends a lot of his summer there. Maybe he'll go play for the Kings. I'm telling you, I wouldn't bet any money on him playing for anyone other than the Pittsburgh Penguins. But that's just me.
Where's Jacob Markstrom going to wind up, our old friend here?
I think he ends up in Calgary, like stays there.
Really? Okay.
Just tell me what the market is for him outside of New Jersey, and unless they find a way to rekindle this deal that's dead, or last check.
What happened there? What happened with that deal?
I don't know, and there has been a lot of pushback from all sides, and my reporting earlier in the week was that they had gotten as close to the finish line as you can without getting a deal done, had more or less received the blessing from Markstrom, if not put a piece of paper in front of him for him to sign. It was close to being a done deal that got scuttled at the last minute. And I don't have insight on why that is. But then since then, and I'm caught up in the spin cycle here, is, oh no, that's not the case, was never the case. And by the way, there's still nothing going on with the Devils.
Yeah. As we know, though, they lie through their teeth, right?
Well,
it's smoke screen
just
season.
consider me as an insider sitting at my desk, just sifting through mounds of BS on a daily basis.
No, exactly.
I'm just,
No,
I have a
exactly.
shovel
Calendar
out.
of BS. Yes.
I feel like I am just shoveling it all day.
Yeah, you know the scene in Jurassic Park? Is it Laura Dern who like puts on the rubber glove and digs into the big mound of whatever sops?
That's Frank Seravalli right
That's
there?
Frank Seravalli on a daily basis. Answer me this. How come everybody's tying Saros to the Kings, but then don't make the next logical step and say, what about Markstrom to the Kings? Like, if the Kings are looking for goaltending, does Markstrom not work as well as Saros?
He would to me,
Mhm.
unless they're just looking for someone younger, significantly younger.
But I mean, they both have term there.
Yeah.
Is it a thing where Conroy doesn't want to
make the
move
same
him in
money,
the
right?
division? Is it a thing where Conroy doesn't want to move him in the division? Or is
I mean,
that
I think that's a preference, but you can't even say that's reality after making 2 deals with the Vancouver Canucks.
Is Calgary going to blow this up? I mean, they terrible loss last night to the Sharks. Our buddy Ryan Pinder pointed out after the game, they are 6-3 against the top 5 teams in the league. Like they are capable, and yet the results are not there consistently enough to keep them tied up against the race. So what is Conroy going to blow this up, or is he going to try to rework it a little bit?
No, he's reworking it. There's no ability to blow it up. Not when you have Jonathan Huberdeau and Nazem Kadri, and I'd include Mackenzie Weegar in that group of major long-term expensive contracts. Kuzmenko, by the way, seems like he's really been a good fit with Huberdeau, and that part is super intriguing. To try and find a way to rekindle that player. I haven't done the math recently, but I know a few days ago, Huberdeau had 16 points in his last 16 games, which sources say not terrible.
Mm-hmm.
I would say they are in a position to consider just about anything. And Rasmus Anderson's name was mentioned by Kevin Weeks yesterday. They've got a lot to consider. Whatever comes across Craig Conroy's desk that makes sense. Like, they're not in a position to be hanging up on anyone, but their design is to be back in contender mode in 2027 when they open their new building. So it's not a full-scale rebuild. It's a reshaping, whatever R word you want to use. That's
but that's 3 years away. Like that gives you some runway.
But that's what it's going to take. I mean, they just don't have the draft capital and prospects in their arsenal to be a team that can turn it around quickly.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is if you take a look at some of the younger players that they do have, like Mangiapane and Zeri and Pospisil, and some of the Sharon Govich if they re-sign him, and some of the kids they got coming up, Rasmus Anderson on defense, and the goaltending situation. Like I think in 3 years, selling off some of the parts here, I think you could be competitive by 2027. Like, I think that's very achievable.
Mangiapane would be a guy that I would consider for sure.
Mm-hmm.
He's probably going to be, I think he's 30 by the time their 2027 rolls around. But like the other guys that you mentioned, those are all pieces that they're currently building around as their foundation.
Right.
Zeri and Pospisil and Pelletier, and probably to a lesser extent, Anderson, anyone that has something that's essentially bolting them down to there is probably, in my estimation, going to be there. But in the meantime, sell off every UFA that you have and sell off every piece that is not going to be on the other side of that, meaning Markstrom at some point, doesn't have to be now, could be the summer, in addition to Mangiapane or whoever else you might deem as outside of that window.
Mm-hmm. We didn't even mention Coronado. I think it's very achievable for Conroy to make the moves here and fashion a contending team.
It's just
by
needed.
2027. Yeah, no, I would agree
They've
with
been
that.
slapping lipstick on that pig for 10 years now of trying to be competitive. And it more or less kind of worked. Like, they had made the playoffs a few years, but this is what it always comes back to for me. Are you a threat to win the Stanley Cup? And if the answer is no, you need to do whatever you can until you can answer yes.
Oh, don't tell us about lipstick on the pig. Frank. We did lipstick on the pig.
Really
But
bad.
here's the
Really
thing.
bad pigs and really smeary lipstick too.
But here's the thing is you need an ownership that's on board.
Right.
And it took someone like Jim Rutherford and his experience, even though I'm sure there's been headaches at times during his tenure dealing with it, to set the record straight and put this team on a course to get there. And guess what? It's also taken them to be really aggressive, trying to find wins on the margins that we've talked about a lot with the moves that Patrick Allvin has made. In Calgary, it's not really all that different, except their owner isn't as intimately involved because he lives in Switzerland. It's more so just that he doesn't like a team not having anything to play for because he thinks that that's bad for the market and attention span in the market. But what they've realized, I think, in Calgary is Craig Conroy and Jerome McGinley have presented to ownership a sort of plan of here's what we need to do. Here's how I think we can do it. And the fans are sitting there saying, about time.
Before you
Always
go,
skeptical of those owners who live in non-extradition.
yes,
tax
exactly.
havens.
Owner living in the Caymans. Before you go, we kind of woke up after this game versus the Red Wings with the Canucks winning again, back on a 3-game winning streak. It was charming, their 20-game start. At 40 games, it was like, wow, a bit head shaking. 6 All-Stars. Wow, okay. Frank, they've got a 6-point lead in the President's Trophy race. Like, what are you hearing around the league? Like, are people like, this has gone past, hey, really nice season for the Vancouver Canucks. Like, this is absurd what's happening this year. Do people believe it? Or executives gobsmacked? Or do they does anybody say they saw this coming for the Canucks?
Well, no one is saying that they saw this coming because they'd be lying. Like,
yes.
Even for someone like me that thought they'd be a firm playoff team, I didn't see President's Trophy in their future. And I don't think the Canucks' own executives thought that could be possible. I think that this has been a perfect storm. It's been everyone being on the same page, your stars hitting their stride, a team that's mostly been healthy outside of a couple injuries to your decor and Susie. We talked about the bottom 6 production and how important that's been. We talked about the aggressive trades that have been made to, fill and cover off some of the holes that they've had. I don't know that we've talked necessarily enough about, even the trade made last year with Philip Hronek. I mean, like everyone knows he's been a big part of this year, but how big a part, I think is a pretty reasonable question. And I think maybe the most exciting part about it is that I believe it's really sustainable.
Looking more and more so as the sample size increases, doesn't it?
I don't mean, just FYI, for clarity, I don't mean sustainable for the rest of this season. I mean, what the foundational pillars that they've put in place seem to be really sustainable.
I hope you get some trades in the next week, buddy.
I hope I don't. But
no?
I don't.
So you prefer sifting
I
through
would
the
really
steaming
like
mounds
to
of
wake
shit?
up and it would just be March 9th.
No, I know, but that's not happening. So between now and next Friday, I hope you get some trades.
I hope
and
it
be
breaks
less
some
time,
trades.
There you go.
Sifting through all the.
Yeah, I hate bringing a shovel, and I mean, thanks for that image. I'm gonna have to get a box of latex gloves. Like, step into my office.
Thanks, Frank.
See you guys.
Hey, everybody, if you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres and Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well. Smash it right now.